Hey friends, this is Ihab, Technical Director of the Sumud Podcast. A quick note that this episode contains content about eating disorders and body image. As always, prioritize your well-being and do what's right for you.
I know that my success is based a lot on luck and circumstance, but I also know and have known for a long time that being my father's daughter is not a good thing in Hollywood. I think we're seeing now how difficult it is to be vaguely pro-Palestinian in Hollywood. It's really impossible.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud. All about humanity, so this right here for everyone. Uplift, amplify, empower everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud.
Visit sumudpod.com to subscribe and connect with us on social media. Consider supporting our work through a contribution on the Support Us page.
On this episode of the Sumud Podcast, we uplift, empower, and amplify Najla Said. Najla is a Palestinian-American author, actress, and playwright, and the daughter of renowned scholar Edward Said. Her one-woman play, Palestine, explores identity and belonging. Her memoir, Looking for Palestine, reflects on growing up Arab American. Welcome, Najla.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's an absolute honor having you. I got to tell you, we're going to talk about your father, hopefully, a little bit later, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
But when I created the podcast, you were one of the first people I thought of. I know you're extremely busy as well, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
My first question for you is post-October 7th. How small has your circle gotten as far as your friends go?
Very small. I mean, I'm a person who has known and been connected to a lot of people in my life. I think partly because I'm in theater. So you kind of meet a lot of different people and you have a lot of different connections. I was always connected to everyone I grew up with, went to high school with, college. Obviously, social media made it so that we were always all connected to more people than we might have been. But as soon as October 7th happened, it was like every Jewish person, or every Zionist, I should say, who knew me attacked me as if I had somehow done something. Partially, I guess, because I'm the only Palestinian that a lot of people know. But I immediately lost work. I lost clients in my personal business, who one client, I've told this story, she sent me an email and said she never wanted to see me again and signed it with Israeli flag emojis. And childhood friends, I don't know, one called me a fake humanist for trying to explain what Hamas was on my social media. I got the impression I was supposed to apologize to every Zionist or Jewish person I'd ever known. So immediately it was like, I felt like I had no friends. That it was like my white feminist friends dropped because they kept bringing up the Hamas rape allegations. And then I'm sort of left with Palestinians and Arabs, some anti-Zionist Jews, and honestly, my Black and Latina friends. And that's pretty much what I have left. And then, of course, there are new people that I've met through this amazing movement. But, you know, trusting people at this point is a little scary. So we go slowly.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, you may not know everybody, but you have many people behind you supporting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's interesting because if we talk about now and then we go back to your childhood growing up in New York.
Yeah.
That was a whole other experience.
Yep.
Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I was actually born in Boston because my dad was teaching at Harvard for like 3 weeks. So I happened to be born there. But I essentially have lived my entire life in New York City on the Upper West Side. My dad taught at Columbia, and Columbia is a little bit farther up than what's considered the Upper West Side. But it's been so gentrified now. It's all one big thing. Education was really important to my parents for obvious reasons. And at the time, the public schools in our neighborhood that I would have gone to were really bad. So they sent me to private school. The first one was an all-girls school. My grandmother, my Lebanese grandmother, my mom's mom had run an all-girls school in Lebanon, and it was the first and only national secular school in the country. So it was this very progressive, feminist school that my mom had gone to, and she thought it had been great for her. So they decided to send it to an all-girls school. But it was a school that like Jackie O went to. It was the waspiest possible school. And we lived on the West Side. And at the time, the West Side was known as sort of like for poor people. And there were more Jewish people on the West Side. It's sort of that Woody Allen, Seinfeld vibe of that world. So when I went to this school, at first people thought I was Indian, asked me why I didn't have a dot on my head. Then they thought I was Jewish because I lived on the West Side. And I was like, I'm not Jewish. I'm Episcopalian like everyone else. And I was, because my grandfather was born in the British Mandate and he was Anglican. And so that's the same as Episcopalian. So that was the first part. And when I got to school, I realized I was so different. I knew there was a war in Lebanon where my mom was from. So I was confused and I just wanted to be American, like a lot of kids. I was at least 12 or 13. A friend's mom asked me what kind of name I had. And I said, I didn't know. I didn't know where my mom was from, which was a complete lie because I'd spent like every summer in Beirut. And I would always like skirt around where my parents were from because, you know, my dad went to Princeton and he went to Harvard and then he taught at Columbia. And my mom was also very accomplished. She has a master's and also an MBA and she worked at a bank. So I just would like try to find the things that made me similar to my friends. But I always felt completely different and like a complete foreigner and that something was wrong with me. And then when I was in like the 7th grade, the first intifada started. So my dad was on TV a lot and I actually got really proud of him. I didn't really completely understand, but you know, kids throwing stones at tanks was at the time a big thing. And a lot of people were moved by this first intifada when it was just rocks. So I became really proud of my dad and I started to say, you know, I'm Palestinian and Lebanese to my friends. And then I switched for high school to a school that was an Episcopal school, a really good school. It was at that point non-denominational, but it was originally a very Christian school. Most of my classmates were Jewish. My brother had gone to this school since kindergarten and had been discriminated against horribly as a kid by the Jewish kids. But when I got there in high school, it was different. I was a girl, so it was easier to fit in. And then my best friend was Jewish. And I never had a best friend who was Jewish before, or I had, but my friends at the original school were not trying to show off their Jewishness. They like celebrated Christmas and stuff. So it was in high school by having, weirdly enough, a Jewish best friend that I started to become more comfortable with my identity. But what people didn't know about my childhood was that my dad's life was constantly in danger. His office was vandalized and firebombed by Meir Kahana's cronies. We had a panic button in our house. I got stuck in Beirut in the war when I was 9. And in earlier years, I had been there in the war. So I had a lot of trouble because also like I had been in Beirut. I knew what the Israeli flag was to a Lebanese person. It was danger. And then I would come home and see this star, the same star on a synagogue. And I didn't understand. So I would walk by the synagogue like, they hate me. I better go quick. But I couldn't tell anyone any of these things because I knew enough about anti-Semitism to know that I couldn't say anything that would make Jewish people uncomfortable. So that was pretty much my childhood. It wasn't until I was really out of college, started acting, and then 9/11 happened, and I sort of became an Arab American that I began to look at this identity stuff in my work and in theater and writing and stuff.
I read this somewhere where you stated your friends had blonde hair. Here you are, dark hair, hairy arms.
Yes, all of it. Hairy arms, sideburns, hairy legs. And they all had really small bones. For some reason that fascinated me because I just felt like I was so big and oafish and dirty. I thought I was dirty, which at some point, one of my WASP friends said to me, there's no such thing as a dirty Arab. It's a dirty Jew. And I was like, okay, that doesn't seem like a nice thing to say either. So it was bizarre. Yeah.
What did you do to try to fit in? Because that's a lot to take in. And I can give you a quick personal story. I think I was in maybe 3rd or 4th grade and I was in gym class and this was like deep South. I was the only Arab there.
Yeah.
And this kid comes up to me and said, why aren't you taking showers? And I said, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you're dark. I'm like, no, that's my skin color. What do you,
Oh,
you
wow.
know? So immediately I started to get very self-conscious about it.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, for me, there were lots of things. I would make up stuff. I remember telling my friends that my mom was like on the Mickey Mouse Club. I didn't even know what the Mickey Mouse Club was. It was like from like 50s and I was growing up in the 80s. And they were like, that's so cool. And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I do stuff like that. But also for me, it really took hold in terms of my appearance very much. I thought I was not pretty. I looked like a boy. My voice was deep. I thought I talked like a boy. And then I was hairy. So I was like, I don't fit in. I'm dirty. I'm dark and I'm hairy. So I think for me, a lot of it became, if I could become beautiful and exotic, then I would fit in. So I think a lot of my high school years were, well, I was deeply anorexic, and that started in high school, but got worse when I went to Palestine, interestingly enough, because I had never seen that kind of suffering and I couldn't eat, which I think a lot of us can relate to at this point, almost 2 years into what's happening in Gaza. I mean, anorexia is a complicated illness. I think people think it's just about wanting to be skinny, and it was that, but it was also my body is shameful because it's Arab and it's too curvy. It was also, I want to disappear because I'm constantly like living through what now are called microaggressions or experiencing them. And there was no word for that. And there was no way you could talk about things like that. And I also wanted to disappear, but I also wanted to have people notice that I was in pain, and perhaps on a more grand level that my people were in pain, but anything to just be white and look white. You know, we don't always talk about class, but class has a lot to do with it. I think wherever you end up is what you end up wanting to emulate. So I somehow ended up in this upper class white world and thought, well, you know, this is where I'm going to be. My father went to Princeton and Harvard and all these schools. So these are my people. I mean, we had this whole other life at home with Arabs, but it was like two separate things. You know, my dad's friends would come over and they'd smoke and drink whiskey and talk about politics until the middle of the night. But that was like a separate secret world. And so I, even through college, thought I'm going to have to assimilate into the white world. 9/11 undid a little bit of that.
Yeah, I hope I get the quote right. I am a Palestinian, Lebanese American Christian woman, but I grew up as a Jew in New York City. I began my life, however, as a WASP. And I thought
exactly.
that was just so powerful, because identity at that age growing up is so important, right? And learning about yourself. How did you on a daily basis reconcile that you were different and that you were sort of forcing yourself to assimilate?
What I did was really separate the two worlds. I only felt safe around my family and with Arab culture and Arab food and Arab everything. That made me feel safe, but I couldn't let my friends see that part. And so I was what's now called code switching constantly.
It's funny, by the way, how we didn't have these words growing up.
We didn't, right? And now I'm like, oh, if I'd had this vocabulary, everything would have been fine. But like, yeah, I would code switch. With my friends, I was white girl. I mean, I was that way a bit at home too, but there was nothing I liked more than Lebanese food. There was nothing I liked more than being around I liked my parents' white friends too, but I felt most comfortable and most love around Arabs and around my family. And so it was just, to survive, I had to keep them separate. And I did for a really long time. And then when I was in high school and then later a bit more in college, I wouldn't even let people come to my house a lot when I was a kid. Some of them weren't allowed because we lived in Harlem. But until I was in high school, and yeah, it is funny because it was my Jewish friend. Her family was a lot like mine. They would yell and scream and slam doors and curse. And my very white waspy friends were very different. It wasn't like all decorated perfectly with nothing out of place. It was like a real home. I don't know why, but through our friendship, I became more confident in who I was. And then I started allowing people into my home because I thought everything about our culture was beautiful. I was completely, ironically, a victim of believing in all the Orientalism in a weird way. So because my friend in high school, my Jewish friend, her sister had lived in Israel, but gone to the West Bank and made friends with Palestine at a time when you couldn't really do that. So this friend of mine knew a lot about what was going on. So I didn't feel so alone and isolated. Because of her, I started to be more open with who I was, weirdly.
Yeah, what's funny is I couldn't really hide it. Down south, we had a goat as a pet in the backyard. I mean, you can't get more Arab than that. And
no, that's awesome. I wanted one once, but my mother wouldn't let me have one. But anyway.
I hear you. You talked about the anorexia, the eating disorder, and I think you mentioned that it was such a Western thing not to eat,
Mhm.
whereas in our culture, eating is almost everything.
One of the things I learned in sort of putting myself back together was that when I was 9, we went to Beirut. It was 1983. My mom, brother, and I got caught in the bombing. It was like in our neighborhood downstairs. And we had to leave on a boat in the middle of the night to Cyprus. And there were bombs going off everywhere. I came back from that trip. I was 9. I didn't go back to Lebanon until 1992 when I was 18. So from the ages of 9 to 18, I was totally disconnected from the Middle East in that regard. And so that was really when my anorexia started. And I think that disconnect from my culture and the intense need to sort of assimilate and try to fit in here and be white, as I said, was detrimental to my health. I mean, anorexia is also very much known for people who have a lot, right? And are overachievers and all of these things, but it's a very Western illness because of also how we prize thinness in this culture more than in others. The summer of 92, when I was 18, we went to Palestine, and it was my dad's first trip back. And I was very anorexic, and we went to Gaza. It was difficult for me to see how these people were, and this was Israeli occupation, just to be clear. I think the story is so old, people get confused, but it was not the people of Gaza who were causing themselves to live under horrible conditions. It was Israel at this point. So I was heartbroken, and I felt like I really couldn't eat at this point in some way to maybe take on their suffering. I don't know. So for me, when I started going back after that summer, I started going back more regularly in the Middle East. And I realized that my refusing food in Palestine from these lovely people in Gaza who had very little and were sharing it with me couldn't have been more Western, and it's more of a rejection of my culture. So part of my healing was not only spending time in Lebanon and with my family all over the place, but also eating the food. There's a psychological component, of course, if it's the food you ate as a child, but I really nourished myself back into my culture by partly loving the culture itself, which includes the food and how that is expression of love. Sometimes annoyingly, my mother doesn't stop cooking for me, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the way we show our love. So your parents obviously seeing you go through this, your brother as well. Your brother, by the way, is named after your grandfather?
Yes,
okay.
Wadia, the hardest name for anyone to pronounce.
Yeah. Wadia, I got it. See, there you go.
Yeah, it's a great job.
The support they gave you through that time, because I read that your dad had noticed that your body was changing. You were slimming down quite a bit. And many people, and we could talk about your father a little bit later, but many people just see him as this academic, prestigious individual, but they had no idea he was down to earth and a gentle soul.
Yeah. My dad was a great daddy. He was a dad. I think that what made him, speak out about Palestine was the same thing that made him do a lot of things, which was his empathy. And to be an empathetic person, you have to be really human in a way. He could see that I was in pain. And I had told him when I was 18, I was crying. I was like, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. And he just held me and was like, we're going to fix it. We're going to figure out what to do. And honestly, I was thinking about this recently. At the time, I remember his Arab friends, my ammos, being really concerned about me. People like Mahmoud Darwish worrying about me. And my dad's friend, Shafi El-Hout, who was a PLO representative, I think, to the UN. He was like, Khalas, Habibti, Khalas. They were so worried about me, and they knew that my dad was so worried about me. And that was one of the most beautiful and also difficult times, because it's the type of illness that's almost like an addiction. So you can want to get better, but not be able to. Yeah, my dad was incredible. And he would take me to get whatever I needed, or drive me, or talk to a waiter and tell him what I would eat. And he was just wonderful. His personality was so larger than life. And the way he was with people was a huge part of who he was. And he really, whatever he said publicly or wrote about, he believed, and he treated people that way. And so I've told this story before, if my brother and I would have a fight, he would make each of us tell our side of the story and listen to each other. That's a very simple parenting move, but it was also indicative of how he felt about everything. You have your story, you have your story. Let's try to find a common ground, make up, or whatever it was. So yeah, he was pretty great.
Did that work, putting you side by side
No.
with your brother? Yeah, of course.
No. Because I felt like it was always my brother who was supposed to be right and I was wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm sure my brother felt the same way.
Of course. And so I usually ask this question, but I think I'm going to ask in two different ways. Your message to your younger self, if you could go back in time, what would you say to yourself? Then also a message to the diaspora in a sense of what we're going through as well.
To my younger self, oh my God, so much. I would probably give myself the message that I am loved, you are loved. Because I don't think I ever felt that or felt that I could be loved when I was younger. But man, just my family alone, as most Arabs can attest to, is more love than I'll. To go back to your first question of how small my circles become, at the time when I was like losing all these people after October 7th, I was like, but I still have my entire family and they get me and they get this and they're not gonna abandon me.
When I thought about asking you this question, the first thing that came to my mind was, I wonder if she had her book back then, if she could have read it back then, looking for Palestine, growing up confused in an Arab American family.
I did, in fact, write it for my younger self. It came out of my solo play, and I had done my solo play at enough schools and colleges, and so many young women had come up to me. It's disheartening to know how many people have had eating issues, but I think because it's in a language that women understand, young women, and plenty of young men have spoken to me about how it affected them, which is great too. When I started doing my play at schools, a couple of mothers would come up to me and tell me their daughters were anorexic or were struggling with their identity and that I helped them. And so there's nothing better than that because, yeah, that's what the book was supposed to be, a letter to my younger self.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant book.
Thank you.
We've already added it. We have a website with all the books we recommend.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
What was that experience like writing it, though? I have to imagine that it was quite emotional.
It was really difficult. So it started, as I said, from a play. So I thought I would just take the play, which was like an hour and a half, and fill it in because it's a play. So I'm telling the story. So a lot comes out through my delivery and what I do. So I'm like, I'll just fill in the stories. And then I realized it's a completely different thing. And I had to get so much in detail that it got painful. When I had to write the part about my father dying, I kept skipping it. I just left that whole section out. And then finally I had to do it. So I sat down and I typed literally every sentence, like, then this happened, then this, and then I left it exactly as it was because I couldn't look back at it. And luckily there were not a lot of edits. So I think it was incredibly painful. I mean, some parts of it were fun, like remembering things about your childhood is actually funny. There were some funny things that I didn't understand, you know. I tell a story of how we saw this cartoon and they were like, oh, salami. And then I went home and did it. And my mother said, that's horrible. Don't do that. That's racist. And I was like, but it's salami. Isn't that funny? Like, I was so proud that I got the pun. And then she was like, it's not funny. So like that stuff was fun to remember, but it was difficult. You think when you write like a memoir, you're going to get back at all the people who are mean to you. It's hard to actually write bad things about people. One, because you stop and think, what am I doing this for? Just to be mean? And then also you're like, these people don't really matter. So some of the stories, my editor and my agent were like, this person was rude to you. You need to not make them a good person. This story means the person was rude to you. Like, so you don't have to be like, oh, it's not her fault. She didn't know, you know, that was racist, which was kind of what I was doing because I didn't want to say anything bad about anyone. I've been thinking lately, like if I had to rewrite this or write like part 2, it would be a lot less apologetic about people who said rude things to me and also about just a lot of things. I think I was pretty scared writing the book. I mean, I think there was still a part of me that was like, I still don't want Jewish people to hate me or Zionists to hate me or whatever it is. I think for me, it's more Jewish people because there's a lot of people who just are confused. Like in my neighborhood, there are people who are like, oh, her father's that guy. And then that's it. And then they don't like me. So there was a part of me in writing the book that still wanted to be liked. And I think 10 or 12 years later, now I'm like, if I wrote this now, it would probably be different. Like my adult voice would be a little different.
So we're on the record. There is a part 2 coming out.
I think there should be, because I think to us and our generation or generations, I think October 7th was like the equivalent of 1967 to my parents, which was like a massive shift in everything, especially being in this country. Yeah. And you'd asked about my message to diaspora Palestinians. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking a lot about us. I mean, I feel like for most of my childhood, the Palestinian movement, whether diaspora or in Palestine, we were all considered Palestinian and one people. And they succeeded so much in the Oslo years of dividing us into Gaza, West Bank, 48, and then diaspora. It's hard to know what to do with your feelings because all of the stuff that is happening is about all of us. We are all Palestinian in the same way. And it's hard in America because people who don't really get it will say, but you're American, you're American, you're American. And I think, yes, we're American, but it's a very particular thing to be Palestinian because we were all kicked out. So I don't know if I would be American otherwise. My grandfather did immigrate to this country, but then he went back to Palestine to have a family. So I may not have been born here. I'm still Palestinian, and we all are. So my message would be to just remember that we're all one people, no matter what. And just because you're not suffering in Gaza right now doesn't mean it doesn't literally tear at your heart and pull your body into like total hell. So that's probably what I would say. We are Palestinian. That's my message.
That's a powerful message. I'm absolutely okay with that.
Thank you.
So I'm considering you an OG in this whole fight, right? And I think a lot of people forget the groundwork that was laid from you to, your father to you.
My father, for sure.
Yeah. Is it frustrating that people are not recognizing that?
Sometimes. I think I get frustrated on social media. Gen Z is amazing. Everyone who has come out for Palestine is amazing. I have nothing against all of this. What concerns me about social media is that everything is in small bits. So people don't really get that comprehensive knowledge. So there are quotes from my dad, but I think if you don't understand my dad's body of work, it's not the same thing. And look, people, influencers or whatever, doing what they're doing something important. It's part of the movement. So what concerns me sometimes is the centering of the self as opposed to what's happening. And it's not just my dad. There were years where if you went to a protest, it was the same 40 people for decades, especially in New York. You knew everybody. I'm now completely surprised when I see someone wearing a keffiyeh on the street because for the entire 50 years I've been alive, every time I saw a keffiyeh, it was someone I knew. So I get concerned that going forward, if people don't engage with the ideas that have already been wrestled with and thought through, then we won't be able to take this forward. And so my father has written a lot about a lot over the decades. And so just quoting Orientalism is great. And people are amazing. They're reading Rashid, they're reading Ilan Pape, they're reading all these wonderful people that I love. My dad gets a lot more credit than some people who I think are just kind of been erased. A lot of the people he worked with. And I even think of someone like Mustafa Barouti in Palestine who does a lot of interviews, but I think people don't know what an incredible person he is. And he, along with my dad and someone else, started a Democratic Party in Palestine, which never got any press and hasn't because it's not useful to Americans. And so for me, that's something that should be known and could be worked on. Instead, everyone's just trying to get their sound bites in and stuff. So sometimes I worry. Yeah, I think the Black movement, like Black Lives Matter and those movements, they do a really good job of raising up their leaders. And I think we do, but I think there are more people who should be celebrated. But I also know that being Palestinian and the way that it's so hard for any of us to get ahead, there's something I see in our community, which is we're all so desperate to get ahead that we sometimes don't look around us. But yeah, and there are thousands of people on the ground who don't get any credit. So I just want that to be remembered. I think the movement of the students and the young people and just regular people is incredible. But I also sometimes feel left out of it, which is weird because I've been in it for my whole life. And I've had people talk to me dismissively, explain my dad's ideas to me, stuff like that, because they don't know who he is. And that frustrates me a lot. But I'm not the person who's going to go, don't you know who I am? You know, like, it's so weird.
Well, call me and I'll do it for you.
Okay, thank you. I will. Be careful.
Yeah. You know, part of the inspiration of this podcast was your father on 2 levels.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah. Level 1, candidly speaking, I teach at a university in DC, and students have come up to me and said, well, how do I support the cause? You know, what should I be reading? And the first thing out of my mouth is obviously Edward Said. And then they say, who? That's very frustrating for me. You have to start there, right?
Thank you. I agree with that.
Yeah. Part 2, doing research on your father, reading his books, watching many of his videos, I felt like I knew him, and I regret, it's weird, I was young. There's no way it could happen. There was no podcasting back then.
Right.
I wish I would have interviewed him. I think getting his thoughts, there's great stories out there, obviously, about him
for sure.
already. But I wish I would have had him on and sort of documented his journey and his stories.
Anyone who contacted him who was Palestinian, he would respond to. He felt really strongly that we had to help everyone who's Palestinian. And so my mom and I still try, like financially, I can't really help people and stuff, but anyone who reaches out to me, I always try to connect them with someone who can help them. So I do know that if you had contacted my dad, he would have definitely responded and done your podcast. He would say yes to a lot of things that other people wouldn't, as long as it was an open conversation. I think at the end of his life, after doing a lot of mainstream media in this country, he stopped after 9/11. He would talk to Charlie Rose because it was long form, but he would only do BBC and European stuff because they gave you more time. And here it was the culture of the soundbite. So I think it's unfortunate. I think he would have loved podcasts. He loved doing radio interviews, and I think he did a lot because radio has always been a little more progressive. But yeah, I think he would have very much loved it. I mean, to me, it's overwhelming to see all these young Arab Americans, young people of Arab or Palestinian descent, just so proud. He would have been so happy to see that. And I am, because again, going back to my book, I felt like I was the only one. And I felt that way also because my family was sort of public. But obviously I'm not. The idea of trying to hide your identity now is just not a thing. I mean, I'm sure there are young people who struggle, of course, but I think people are mostly proud to be Palestinian and not ashamed. And that's huge. And I think that he had something to do with that. Maybe not everything, but something.
I'll go a step further. I think people want to be Palestinian.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're so delicious and we're so loving. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if he were on the podcast, I would only say one thing. I would say, just teach me. And then I would shut up the whole time and just let him go.
Be careful, he would teach you the piano or something.
Yeah, brilliant. And by the way, his focus was literature. It wasn't politics originally.
His expertise was in 19th century British literature. So like Jane Austen and Charles Dickens. And I mean, his work comes out of all that because he saw the colonialism through the stories and all of that. But he didn't start actually speaking out on Palestine until he was very, very well established as a literary critic and had achieved some recognition. And it was almost this idea of, I know your language better than you, colonizer. So he had this respect. Then people would listen to him talk about Palestine. But it was only because he mastered the white world. It's very strange, but also kind of amazing.
He used everything about them against them because he studied them so well. Yeah. And you mentioned that him passing, I think it was in 2003, he passed away of leukemia. My mother passed away as well of leukemia. So I completely appreciate that process and the hardship. Your dad being so important to you and such a critical person to society, can you describe just those feelings? It's hard for me to describe my own feelings. So this is a tricky question, just FYI. But can you describe just seeing him over time?
You know, my dad became sick when I was 17, which was not, as I already mentioned, the best time in my life. And it actually made my anorexia worse because I couldn't deal with it. And I think I was trying to sort of possibly be sick with him in some weird way. So from 17 to 29, he was sick. So college for me was difficult. My years after college were difficult. He was constantly in and out of the hospital because he had chronic leukemia and he would get these treatments in the summer. But man, even when he died, we didn't even believe it because he would get so sick. Then he would just be like, I have to go give a talk, or he would travel, or he would write 3 books. And you were like, what? I can't do anything. And this man is like on death's door and still going. And that was incredible to watch. He would not let the illness get him. And you can see in some of the later interviews, he had a raspy voice because he had like a sinus infection for like 15 months in a lot of the interviews. And it's painful to watch, but I'm also so in awe of how, despite, and maybe even because of his illness, what he always used to say is you have to press on, you press on. And he really did. And I think he lasted 12 years because of his inability to give up hope or forward thinking. He was pretty much a very optimistic person. Interestingly, as realistic as he was, there was always hope and optimism.
So it was his version of Sumud, right?
Exactly that.
Yeah. I want to ask, what would he say today, post October 7th? What message would he deliver to us right now? Because I think he would be on the front lines, obviously. Yeah. And in my eyes, the way I would see it, just so you know, is like, okay, it's game time, people. We've been ready for this, right?
Yeah. I was going to say that. I think he would be like, basically like, don't be discouraged. We have come so far. I mean, I can even say this. When Gaza was invaded in 2014, that was right after my book came out, and I was interviewed a lot. And I kept being like, why are people interviewing me on the news? It's not my expertise. And now look how many people we have who can speak articulately about this. My dad used to do this whenever he would see anyone from far, like on the street or on the Columbia campus, who was a friend of his who was from any marginalized group. He would just go like this from far away. And I think that the image I have of him is him just doing this with his fist in the air awkwardly to all of us and being like, this is it. This is what we have been fighting for, and it is working. As much as things feel like they're falling down around us, and particularly now at Columbia, I'm currently in my childhood bedroom, as you can probably tell from the frilly little things behind me. I'm on Columbia campus. The president, or the just resigned president, is downstairs in this very building. So it's been feeling like things are being dismantled around us. But I'm not going anywhere. My mom's not leaving this apartment. All of these things that are very realistic and concrete are also metaphors for how far we have come and how we are not going back. I mean, other people have said this is like the most critical time. And as awful as it is, this is sort of a breakthrough moment. He would be so proud. Oh my God, he would be so proud of everybody. And he'd just be encouraging and also still talking in the strongest terms. I don't think he would capitulate to anyone, not Trump, not whoever.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine his heart would have been broken too to see Columbia's.
My mom said that to me yesterday. She said, why do I have to see all of this horrible suffering in my last decade? Can I get a break? Yeah. And that really broke my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, I'd imagine your mom and your father would be at the encampments with the students.
Yeah. I mean, right. My mom, I've tried to talk to her about what's happening, and she's just very angry. She said, yeah, I beshum Columbia. Yeah. She's, not young. And I think at this point, she had also wanted to go back to Lebanon, which is now impossible. So I think, yeah, from watching my mom, I see exactly what I said, like the incredible joy and pride at seeing what has come and how they helped bring about this moment, but also a complete sadness at like everything that we tried to accomplish is now getting summarily like unaccomplished or deleted.
How's she doing overall?
She's doing okay. I think it's been tough for her. My mom is one of the toughest people in general. She was behind a lot of my dad's successes, as the old cliche goes. If she hadn't kept things in order, I don't know if he would survive. He was so funny about just gallivanting through the world without thinking about paying bills and stuff. But since his death, she has been the one who, there would not be an Edward Said chair at Columbia without my mom and her efforts. That's privately funded. The Center for Palestine Studies, she was instrumental in getting that started. And then there's also an Edward Said lecture series, not only at Columbia, but at tens of dozens of universities all over the world. I think, and she also runs the music projects that my dad started with Daniel Barenboim. Mainly, she is focused on the Palestinian musicians in Palestine and less so on the orchestra. So she has really been working a lot on the ground and in larger ways. I think it's really hard for her right now. I mean, she's doing great. She's in great health. She's wonderful. But I think I can see the heartbreak.
Some of the research said that she was a writer.
My Lebanese grandmother wrote her memoir in Arabic and it was published. She also wrote it in English in 1979 and gave it to my dad. And he's like, this manuscript needs a lot of work. And he put it aside. And after my dad died, my mom pulled it out and she edited it with an editor. And so she did. Yes, she writes. She's a good writer. She is, but she's not a writer per se.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And does she still sort of share stories about your father now?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked recently. She was just telling me, like, 1968, my dad was teaching at Columbia already, the year of all the protests. He was on sabbatical, but then he came back in the fall and they were protesting and he was sort of part of it. And that was like when he switched and started being more political. Yeah, she does tell me stories about him, but there's so much to remember. He was a pretty lively character and he was really funny.
Yeah. So you had stated, well, first, we all have our superpower. Your dad clearly had his superpower. Your mother has her superpower. Your brother, you have your own superpower because you said, I don't do his work. I'm an actress. I'm not an activist. I hate going to protest. I have a medium, theater, and this is the way that I talk about this stuff. I'm a storyteller.
Yes. I don't like protests only because large crowds scare me, to be honest. I get nervous. I feel like I'm going to get trampled. And then I get overwhelmed with emotion. Some of it good emotion, some of it other emotion. And I get uncomfortable. I graduated from college in 1996. And the first few years I was trying to be an actress, I was, again, just trying to be a white person, but also the business I'm in at that time wasn't really into diversity anyway. So it was better to try to be white. So they were like, oh, you could be Jewish or Italian. So that was like my shtick. But then there was my name, which didn't help because our imaginations don't work that well. I think then after 9/11, I met with some Arab theater people or Arab Americans. And we didn't know, none of us had ever really explored our identity. We all had parents who were Arab that we'd grown up in the West. We actually started a little bit before 9/11, to be fair, but it doesn't matter. 9/11 happened. We decided to do a documentary style play. So we asked people, what comes to mind when you hear the word Arab? And so I kind of got really excited by this project because the white people would say like camels, desert, bombs, whatever. And the Arabs would say love, food, work, home, like completely different words. So we did this production, then we started this company, and that's where my solo play came out of. And I think it was in that world of theater and a safe environment with other Arab Americans exploring it, I was able to explore the themes that my dad explored in a way that made sense to me. I'm also much more casual, more American. His work was really highbrow and he had a sort of British accent sometimes. I found my voice through theater. And I think that's what I was trying to say in that quote, which is that I don't know how to express all of my feelings and all of my thoughts about being Palestinian, being Arab, and the world in any other way but the way that I know, which is my language, which is theater and also writing.
Yeah, interestingly enough, both of you used art in a way of educating people, which is brilliant. And there is a parallel here. I don't know if I'm going to get these names right. I'm so sorry. You co-founded Nibras Theater Collective.
Nibras, it was called.
Nibras. Okay, see, I messed it up.
No one has ever pronounced it correctly.
Okay.
Because nobody knows that word. It's an Arabic word. It means, it's like a handheld lantern because we wanted to sort of light the way.
Which is amazing. But your dad also co-founded the West Eastern, is it Divan Orchestra?
Divan, yes.
Divan, okay. See, I got one right.
I have trouble with that word too.
Yeah. But that's pretty cool. I mean, you created something, your dad created something, different avenues, obviously, but both very artistic.
Yeah, the orchestra still goes and there's an academy in Berlin. They actually created a libretto out of part of my book, which they ended up doing all over Europe at all these fancy concerts. So we've also merged the two things together, which Daniel Barenboim did that for me, which I thought was lovely, to take part of my written work and turn it into music. I'm very dedicated to art. I think it's, for me, the only voice that helps. It seems sometimes like, why are we doing this right now? What's it going to do? But when I was a kid, I didn't talk a lot. And partly was because I was, as I said earlier, scared to tell people where I might be from. And at 8 years old, I was put in theater class and I came alive. And so there was something about being allowed to like hold all these different identities, and it was okay. And that's what happens when you're on stage. And I think that that's very similar to my dad's whole way of thinking about things. So in many ways, theater is also therapy. You know, there's the Jenin Freedom Theater in Palestine, and a lot of that was started to help the kids in Jenin deal with their trauma. So to me, it's a different avenue, but it's the same idea, I guess.
It's a form of resistance.
Yeah,
right?
It definitely is. Art is definitely a form of resistance.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, especially in America, all I have to do is stand on stage or in front of a camera, and it's a political statement because I'm Palestinian. So people are putting all this on you. You might as well take advantage of it and tell the stories that you want to tell.
Yeah. So talk about the one woman show, Palestine. Did your father watch you one time?
No.
No? Okay.
He never got to see it. There are parts of it that he had read because it was cobbled together from journal entries and things that I'd written, and then I added to it. But essentially it started when we had Nebraska, this theater company. We did a project in a high school, and this high school had invited this Israeli filmmaker who is very anti-Zionist, and she showed a film, and she was frustrated because the students, who were a lot of were Jewish, would not criticize Israel when she talked to them after the screening. So she asked me if I would go back to the school with her and maybe do something together. So we each decided to write a short piece, and I wrote the bones of what became Palestine, the play. It was 15 minutes, and it was just the story of me going to Palestine with my family when I was 18 and my anorexia and all that. She wrote about being in the army, in the Israeli army. She was also anorexic. It was kind of crazy. We both wrote separately without knowing. After that, I did this 15-minute piece at another event we did in New York. And a New York Theater Workshop encouraged me to apply for a residency and make it longer. So I was like, I don't have anything else to say. But then I went away for a week, and by the end of the week, I had an hour-long play. When I came back to New York, we started developing it and doing readings of what I had written. And I had already an hour and 20 minutes, and I hadn't talked about being stuck in a war when I was 8 or 9, and again in 2006, because I was stuck in Beirut again in 2006, all by myself. So we kept adding to it and ultimately produced it. It was produced in New York off Broadway. And it's just basically a lot of what you and I have talked about, my journey. But you also go with me on my first trip to Palestine. So I allow myself to embarrass my younger self and talk about how I thought everything was gross and I didn't want Arafat to touch me.
Let me help you out. I think you said Arafat's slobbery double cheek kiss. Is
yes.
Right?
I was like, and my dad was laughing. He's like, that's not how you behave in front of someone like that. And I was like, I don't care. I was awful. So you go with me. And because I'm so dismissive of the whole thing, I think the audience gets to be like, okay, I understand where she's coming from, but then they get to learn as I learn. The other thing is the first part of the play, and this was a choice that I made to make sure that the audience would stay with me, is me talking about how I grew up as a Jew in New York. And I used to speak Yiddish and, schwitzing and all this. And that really got the audience in. And then they would listen to me because I was associating with them. I'm Arab. And my family's Christian, but Islam is part of our culture, 100%. And so in the same way that I grew up in New York on the Upper West Side, Judaism is part of my culture because that's what was around me. And so as soon as I identify at the beginning with the quote unquote enemy, I end up like disarming them, and then they come along on the journey with me. So it feels like I'm more like one of them. And that was a lot of it, like going to Palestine as this family from New York with American passports. Most people there thought we were Jewish, and that was really difficult. So anyway, The play then expanded, and then I did it off Broadway. No theater wanted to do it in the whole country. So I ended up traveling around to colleges for the last 10 to 15 years doing my play for students, which has also been interesting because I was able to see, let's say, the college's JVP chapter invited me, or SJP, and maybe the head of SJP is a guy with a yarmulke. You know, it's like things are changing so quickly. And I was able to sort of see that as I went from college to college over these years. The irony being, like, I don't think any college will invite me now, but that's okay.
Who needs them anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But did you realize that's such a powerful piece of artwork you created? Do you recognize that?
I do sometimes, and I get sad that I don't get to do it as much because I think I would have loved to have it be more of a thing. And I've been thinking maybe about putting it on film. It's tricky with our union stuff, but if I put it on film, then more people can see it. Also, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to play myself as a teenager, believably.
They'll believe it. They'll believe it.
Thank you.
Have you been to Busboys and Poets in DC before?
I have, yes.
So just want to throw this idea out there. We'll support it. How about we do the play at Busboys and Poets location?
I would love that. I would love that.
Okay. I'll talk to Andy.
He's one of my favorite places.
Okay, great. So that's a deal. We'll figure it out, right?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
No, not a problem. And speaking about being an actress, I mean, you've been in NCIS New Orleans.
I was on New Amsterdam. I played a doctor.
Okay.
I played a neurosurgeon, of course, because I'm a genius.
Yeah.
And Party of Five a long time ago. Stuff like that, yeah.
That's pretty cool. And what was the experience of being a Palestinian in that world? You talked about it a little bit already.
It's a lot. So as I said, when I started in the business in the late 90s, it was like, just be white. Like, don't try to be anything else. Then after 9/11, we sort of became an identity, Arab American, but it's like Middle Eastern. So they throw Indian and Afghani. And so there's a lot of auditioning. I auditioned once. They were like, we know you don't speak Dari, but we wrote it out for you. And I'm like, I'm not even from Afghanistan. So I get to the audition and it's a lot of Iranian people. And there were actually 2 people there who could speak Dari. And I'm like, these are the only 2 people you should have had at this audition. Like, what is going on? I had a good experience with NCIS New Orleans, even though the plot was ridiculous. My character was just like a Syrian woman who left during the war, but she was just a regular person. And so I guess the guys in the executive world wanted me in like a nabaya and a black thing. And the costume designer was like, I told them, no, you're going to wear a long sleeve shirt and jeans and a hijab. And of course, I'm like, why does this character wear a hijab? Because I want to know, because I'm the character. I know they're just doing it because it signals Arab woman, but I like to challenge them a little. And I'm like, why does she even wear a hijab? Do you know? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, I'm just saying, because I have nothing against hijabs, by the way. It's just the stereotyping is absurd and it gets ridiculous. There are more opportunities now because, as I'm sure you can see when you watch anything, they scatter different ethnicities in. When I was growing up, if you watched a TV show about a high school, it was like a bunch of white kids. Maybe one had dark hair and one was black, but that was it. Now, if you watch a TV show about a high school, there's like an Asian kid, a Latino kid, a black kid, special needs kid, a person in a wheelchair. Like, they're trying really hard. So they'll cast certain small roles in TV. Will say, please submit Middle Eastern. And you're like, oh, they're just making us, like, peppering us on the set. But I don't know how else they're supposed to do that, because I don't know. I don't know how you fix something that's so messed up to begin with. But I feel a little bit vindicated because it's a tricky business and a lot of really talented people get nowhere and really untalented people get everywhere. Gal Gadot, for example, or Gadot, which I think is really how you say her name. There's no talent in that woman. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, so I know that my success is based a lot on luck and circumstance, but I also know and have known for a long time that being my father's daughter is not a good thing in Hollywood. And I think we're seeing now how difficult it is to be vaguely pro-Palestinian in Hollywood. It's really impossible. And I have friends who have worked there who were told, like, you're never going to get anywhere because of your views. So it makes me sad because I think I've always had one dream, which was to do what I love, like most people. There's this myth of in America, you can do whatever you want. I think for a lot of us who are Arab and Palestinian, you can't. You can only get so far. I still teach Pilates. I love my other job. It's a huge part of who I am, and I'm very serious about it, and I'm very interested in it. But I don't think I'll ever be able to not have another job. And that's upsetting. But I also feel a little bit vindicated now because people can sort of see that Hollywood is not, or even, I mean, it's not just Hollywood, it's the theater as well. The theater world is just as Zionist, I would say.
This is just me thinking outside the box. Can't we start some YouTube show featuring you? And
Yes,
stuff
that
like
would be
that?
amazing.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to do these things on my own.
Well, we'll figure out the tech part of it. You just got to figure out, like, the creative.
Okay, the show that I can do.
Yeah. What advice would you give young Palestinians right now who aspire to be an actor or an actress?
That's a great question. I would say do not ever deny who you are and just keep doing the work and showing up in the way that you need to show up. And also don't be afraid if you do get a job and there's something off. 9 times out of 10, the producers and directors just don't know. And if you tell them, they'll change it. So don't ever be afraid to speak up on set, because that is how we change things. Unfortunately, we have to do these jobs, but it's better to represent accurately. And then when you're on set, challenge it, ask questions, because I think, and this is from experience, my own and others, even if it's a tiny change, you'll be able to change one little thing and it's worth it.
See, I have another business idea for you. Actor coaching or advising.
Well, that's what I always do that for people, because nobody did that for me, because it's such a competitive business. When I started, no one would help me and I was so lost. And I'm happy to do that for other people.
Yeah.
So anytime, anybody, I'm right here.
We appreciate that. And we're here to help you, of course, and support
Thank
you.
you.
I want to ask you, you mentioned Mahmoud Darwish earlier. What was it like talking to him and spending time with him?
He was a wonderful human. He was also very poetic. Like once we had dinner in Paris, I was like 19, and he got down on his knee and pulled this rose out of the vase on the dinner table, and he gave it to me and asked me to marry him. I mean, it was completely being silly, but it was very much what you would expect of a poet. And he and my dad were really close. And what I remember most is them laughing, like hysterically laughing a lot. And then, of course, having serious conversations with whiskey and cigarettes, but laughing. I remember him laughing. Yeah.
So how do we support you? What can we do to help?
Oh, what a great question.
Yeah.
You can send me lots of, no, I'm just kidding. Read my book. If you want to host me doing my play, I will do it for a benefit. I will do it for myself. I will do it for you. I love traveling with my play. So that would be a great way. Invite me to speak or talk or perform, and then read my book. And
she will be in DC soon. I'm going to make it happen.
Oh, thank you. I would love to be in DC soon.
And what's the one thing or many things you would like the world to know about you?
I really do believe that there is good in everyone, and maybe I shouldn't, but I'm hoping that's true. That I'm also a very loyal and very caring and very human person. I feel things really deeply. I can be a little nuts about my feelings. But yeah, I think this goes for my whole family. We are more than proud to be related to and from the family of someone so revered. And that I hope that people take the time to look at my work as well as his when they judge me or think about who I am. Because sometimes I just get invited as his daughter and nobody takes the time to know who I am. And that's hard because I am really proud. I wish that sometimes people would look at my work a little bit separately. You have done this perfectly, actually.
I'll tell you, I was actually very nervous because I wanted this interview to be about you, but there was just no way not to bring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I say. I mean, my Palestinian identity is always going to have to relate to how I was raised and who my father is. So it doesn't bother me at all to answer or talk about him. And I love talking about him. But there are times when people don't know anything about me and don't even try, and that's difficult. And I would also encourage people to check out my brother's work. He is a lawyer who has written a lot about the Patriot Act and he knows a lot, particularly like about what's happening with Mahmoud Khalil and all of the stuff that's happening now. He's an incredible person as well. My whole family is amazing.
But you're promising us here right now that there will be another book coming out.
I'm promising you,
Okay.
because I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks, like nonstop. So it's going to happen.
Not the Palestinian, inshallah.
No, I don't do that. I'm super American with my promises. You'll get it.
Great. Wonderful. Any final words you'd like to tell the audience before we wrap up?
Just thank you for taking the time to talk to me and get to know me, and to talk to a Palestinian in the diaspora, because I think a lot of us feel like we have a lot to say, but we're not getting the opportunity as much. So it really is amazing that you have given me and others that opportunity.
Anytime you want to come back on, it takes me 2 minutes to set this up. So you just let me know, and I'll let you say whatever you want to say.
Okay, awesome. Thank
you so much.
Listen, stay tuned, cause it's time for some mood.